Hello everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is Duncan the DM Productions. I just want to thank you for checking out my new video on the Kids on Bike systems. Today I'm going to cover a topic that was suggested in one of my videos by Cliff. He suggested it in my last video called Running the Game. While this was a pretty good overview on how to be a better GM, I was hoping for something more specific to the Kids on Bike game system. Thank you for your feedback, Cliff. This lets me know how I can change my content to make it better for you. After getting this comment, I reached out to Cliff and asked what areas he would like help in, and one of the suggestions was how to build his NPCs. So today's video will be about that topic, building NPCs in the Kids on Bike system. Before I start, I wanted to thank Cliff for the suggestion of the topic, but also want to thank him for sharing his campaign on the Facebook community group that we're in. He has a great looking game, and here are some of the pictures that he's shared so far. The first one is the map of the town that he and his players worked to create. This is a great example of a small map keeping the town easy to travel through and leaving open space where new stuff could be added later. The second image is of the houses that he's using on his table. These help show uniqueness to the house so people can tell the difference between them. He said he found a lot of these at different thrift shops, so he's able to get them fairly cheaply to help decorate his table. To me, they look like the houses you find around the holidays that are designed for building Christmas villages. The third images are figurines that he uses to represent the characters in this game. This lets you easily tell which NPC you run into and where you are on the board. This is a great thing to use if you're able to play in person. And the last one just shows his creativity and time that he's put into the game. One of the stores in the shop is a local bakery, and he has this welcome sign, where if you read it as it currently hangs, it reads "Come in." But once you flip it over, it becomes "Go away." Cliff is posting and sharing these pictures on the Kids on Bike community page. I have the link down below in case you're interested. But you can keep an eye on his game and see the pictures and ideas that he's come up with. Also in this page, there's a bunch of like-minded individuals who are interested in the Kids on Bike scheme. So they're here if you want to bounce ideas off of them. And also, one of the creators of the game is commonly in this Facebook group looking at the different posts. So if you're a fan of the Kids on Bikes game, please make sure to sign up for it with the link below. Now, building your NPCs. When I build my NPCs, the first thing I try to think of is how often this person is going to come up in the story. Are they a main character? Are they a frequent occurrence? Or are they a one-time there? These are going to be the key things I use when I build my characters. Now, the primary NPCs in the game, this can be the bad guys in the game, so like the principal, the kid's parents, the different NPCs are going to be reoccurring that you're going to use in your story. For these NPCs, I'll typically build them the same way I would build a player character. I'm going to go through, assign all their dice, taking into account their background and how they're going to affect the story. And then I'll also go through and give them strengths just like a regular character, as well as fears and motivations, since those drive how the person behaves. Now I'm going to go over an example of one of the characters in my current Kids on Bikes game, the Hillbrook Kids on Bikes game. I record my sessions of this game so you can watch it to see how a real game plays through. But role-playing games are played differently at all tables, so there's no one right way how to do it. So my example is Miss Peterson. She's a lady in her mid-50s who is part of a secret society in the town, and she is a friend to Tate's mother. She is a widow, and she is wealthy since her husband has passed away. In our story, it's recently come up that she has an appetite for younger men who've recently graduated from high school. I'll go through the stats I gave her and give the justifications on why she was given those. You could use templates as well, but I like to make them individually to make sure the stats are in the best spot. Her lowest stat is the D4 is brawn. This represents that her reliance on others for doing manual labor and for her liver to pamper life. Her D8 is her brains. She went to college and is well educated but didn't work after school, so she has a lot of book smarts versus applied knowledge. Her charm is her primary stat, the D12. This is the skill she's learned to use most. After all, you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. She has relied on this skill much more since her husband has passed away. Her flight is a D12. While this mainly represents her ability to get out of verbal situations, when you're part of a secret society, you'll be asked to talk about things that you're not supposed to, or even accused of things that you don't want to be blamed for. So you need to be able to get out of those conversations. Her fight is only the D6. Normally her fight is just going to be for shock value of slapping people, not to cause harm, but to cause attention. The last is a D10 for her grit. Being able to resist the peer pressure and questioning of her society is important. This can also prevent her from giving out information that her opponents try to press out of her. Now for the two strengths that I gave her, skilled at seduction. This way she still feels like she's wanted by younger men. And wealthy. This accounts to all the money she's gotten since her husband has passed away. Her flaw is ambitious. She wants to become the leader of the secret society that she's a part of. Her fear is not being pretty anymore or not being wanted. As the main character in the story, She is built, so I have dice to use when they make opposed checks against her. She has her motivation, which will help dictate her behavior. The second type of character I make are background characters. These are characters in the town who are there. They may run into a couple times, but they're not critical to the story. Now, for these characters, I will typically assign their stats, but a lot of times I'll remove their d20 since they're not a main character. This makes it easier for the players to be able to get what they need from them. It also helps to reduce the big variance between rolling the d20 and all the rest of the dice. To make up for this, I'll typically raise their low stat from the d4 up to a d6, or maybe even a d8, if it makes sense, unless I really want them to keep that low d4 in a specific stat. Normally I do not give them strengths, but I will include their fear and motivation since this is important on how the character behaves. My example is from my Kids on Bike game in Hillbrook. It's Sheriff Thompson. So far he hasn't come up yet, but his name has surfaced a couple times. Now for his background, Sheriff Thompson grew up in Hillbrook and he went to the local high school. He was a star quarterback on the team, so he was very popular. In his senior year, he tore up his knee and it cost him the scholarship that he had earned. Stuck in Hillbrook, he decided to become a deputy and since has become sheriff. He took this position after the last one retired. He relied on his popularity from high school to help him win the election for it. Now for his stats, he got a D8 for brawn, as he often works out to keep in shape, but he's far from the athlete that he was in high school. His brains is a D6. High school was the farthest he made it in school, as he was relying on his football career to take him to the next level. The sheriff sticks to the laws versus trying to win people over with compassion and understanding, so this is why his charm is lower than you'd think. His flight is a D6. His attitude is more the reason why his flight is low. He knows he's the sheriff and he feels he doesn't need to run from instances since he is the voice of the law. His fight is a D12, which is his highest one. Over the years, he's had many physical altercations in the field and has learned how to deal with these physical problems. His last is his grit, which is a D10. He's been in this very unrewarding role and he's gotten used to what people can dish out when they get angry at him and the position of the law. The last are the NPCs who have no major part in your story. There are people that you create when your players enter the quick stop for the first time, and there are people your players will probably never see again. For these people, you'll need to create them on the spot unless you've taken the time to plan out all of the characters in your town, which is way too much work. When the players are interacting with these characters, I'll use a difficulty scale to come up with how hard the check should be to get what they're trying to get. I'll also try to keep the checks low since you don't want your unimportant characters to stump the players as they go on their quest. Now these are the three types of NPCs for humans in my Kids on Bikes game, or Kids on Brooms. If the group is fighting against a creature or a monster, I have two different ways that I handle it, similar to what I have above. The first method is to stat out the creature and give them dice appropriate for the creature's type. If you do this, most of their bigger dice are going to end up in the physical stats, fight, brawn, or grit. When you make your creature, you do not have to follow the normal rules, so if you want to make him really imposing, you can give him more larger dice than a standard person would get. This will cause your players to have to rely more on tactics and planning ahead versus fighting the creature head on, which makes sense because when you run into a bear or a werewolf, you're not going to be able to best it with physical strength. Also for your creatures and monsters, feel free to give them any strengths that would make sense for them, like quick healing for a werewolf. Now the method I prefer for monsters and creatures is giving difficulties to each action. This allows more flexibility for you to control the fight. You can set the difficulties higher at the beginning of the fight when the creature is fresh or unhurt. Then as the fight continues and the creature is winded or becomes puzzled by the actions, you can drop the difficulty down to represent the advantage the players are getting over the creature. As you continue to lower the difficulty, it will make it easier for your players to succeed at overcoming this challenge, if that's what you're looking to do. If you're playing one of the rare games where you want your players to fail because, well, they shouldn't be able to beat a werewolf, then by not using dice, you can keep your difficulties high. Keep it challenging the whole time as you continue to wear down your players. Now, if you do take this approach and have the intent to finish off your players, typically I'll warn my players ahead of time that death is a real possibility in the game, so that way they're not completely shocked when it happens. Thank you for watching this Duncan the DM Productions. Remember that success will help your players push the story along, but their failures will force the players to add to the story.